This may seem strange, since I'm sure some of you have gone to this section thinking that you're going to get a peek at the VNV Nation studio and you're expecting shitloads of gear and stuff all sort of sitting around me. Well, that's not going to happen, I'm afraid. The reason being is that Future Perfect, of course, was made with just a PC. And this caused a lot of problems for some people when I said, do you want to come down to the studio? And they said, yeah, sure, that'd be really great. And they arrived and found me sitting there with just a flat screen, pair of nice speakers, these Genelecs here, and a keyboard, and that was pretty much it. And to be honest, that's actually all we needed to make the album. So what I was trying to point out with this section is basically, I'm sure there's a lot of people at home who make music, watching this, who make music with computers, whether it be a Mac or a PC, whichever is your chosen poison, and would like to know a little bit about, I guess, how we make music, and maybe sort of give them some idea about how they can make some music themselves. In this case, you just get to see something that looks like yeah, a sad git sitting at a table with a computer screen. So you need the following: one PC. On the keyboard side, you don't actually need anything very, very expensive. The thing you need are ideas, and you need to be able to play your music somewhere at a decent volume without your mother screaming at you to turn it down, which I didn't have, thankfully. But a trusty old controller keyboard, and this one is a pretty crap one that's been in my possession for about, I don't know, probably about 6 or 7 years. For Future Perfect, I sat down with well, first thing I did was I packed all the equipment away, all the old analog synthesizers and samplers and bits and pieces, and compiled myself a list of all the bits and pieces that I wanted to use for the album that I would rely on. And then I made up a little shopping list, and I went out and I got all these little bits and pieces. So the main thing, the software package I've been using for the last couple of years is Logic Audio. And there are people out there who use Cubase or Sonar, whatever works for you. It's, Logic's got its forte, Cubase has got its forte, and Sonar as well. So it's horses for courses, really. The thing about Logic Audio is there's a bunch of packages that are available for it. Like with Cubase, you get Halion or Halion, whatever the hell they call it, God knows. They're German, so I guess it's Halion. It being a sampler, and you get some synths with it. The same thing goes with Logic. You get things like the ES1, which is a little baby synthesizer for it. And when you hear these things, you think, okay, it's not really that fantastic, it's not very impressive, but it's what you do with it. And the best thing about being in a computer environment is that you have your choice of thousands of plugins available. Again, I hunted around and I looked for some really, really good plugins, and I found things like the Waves bundle, and the TC Power Core, which is an awesome card. Expensive, but worth it for the reverbs. The reverbs have to be good. So as far as kit, I chose a couple of synths. I spent a lot of time going through the entire library for things like Reactor, which was the main synth that I used on the album. I loved a synthesizer from them called Junatic, which very simple. Somebody's tried to copy a synth from the early 80s called the Juno, Roland Juno 6 or the Juno 60. And I took the thing, and knowing a bit about synths, I pulled it apart, added some circuits in, and ended up with something that I really, really liked, that had a little bit of, that could be sit anywhere in a mix. And the original Junatics only got one oscillator. I gave it a second one, because I'm like that. And then, yeah, basically the thing does the job, and it was providing, I mean, no joke, it was providing anywhere from like 30 to 40% of the sounds on the album. It was used a lot in the song which I'm going to show you, which was Electronaut, and I figured this would be the best example of a song on the album since it's an instrumental. So for Electronaut, I had a whole bunch of synths put together, basically things like different Reactor synths, which I'm going to give you a close-up of, and they had a really nice granular synthesizer which did all these kind of wonderful sounds. And let me see, where are you? Things like, so I had things like, where's my little Junatic? It's got to be in here somewhere. There's the fella. And that was doing all these fun little bits and pieces, which was nice. What else do we have here? We have things like strings. Something from Praise the Fallen, but anyway. You get things like Battery, which did all the drum kits for Electronaut, and there's a couple of copies of that. Where's the fella? Yeah, this is the ES1. A crap synth. However, it provided that whole arpeggio in the middle of Electronaut. You slap that through an EQ, some kind of parametric EQ, and some kind of weird filter, and you can get some amazing effects. The thing about working with VSTs, or audio units if you're an OS X user, and you've got shitloads of money to spend, is that there are effects available which do very good renditions of hardware effects, which if you were to spend the money on, you would probably end up spending a good couple of thousand euro, dollars, whatever on them. And I don't really see the point. I wanted Future Perfect to be incredibly minimal. I wanted it to be one single interface, everything done with a computer to sort of reflect how technology had evolved. It was kind of part of the whole futuristic or futurism theme behind the album, and very in keeping with it. So for me, the idea of working and the challenge of working with a single machine, a single interface, and doing the entire mixing of an album, I'm pretty happy with the results. It could have been better. Everything could be better. But then when you do an album, as any musician out there knows, you do an album and you go back and listen to it 6 months after you've finished it, you think all the things you could have changed and all the things you could have done better. Genelec 1031As, and as far as I'm concerned, and the guy holding the camera tested them with me one day, are incredible. Absolutely awesome, and hands down to you, Finland, for that, because they were the most amazing speakers in the whole room, and just for punch and clarity, and we tried them out with all different types of music. It's what you feel's right. Go test them out, try them out, and in the end, what you're playing with here is going to sound really good. If you're playing them on a little tiny set of Tannoy or Tandy speakers, oh, by the way, I smoke, just in case you haven't noticed on any of the other sections of this DVD. Helps me think and helps me talk. Doesn't help me in a lot of other ways, but hey. Some of these wonderful instruments, when you put them together, I write a sequence. I write a couple of sequences, variations of each sequence, and then until I build up a main part of the song, I get an idea out of, writing the main melody is, if I solo something here, writing stuff like this, something as simple as that, and that kind of itself sort of inspired the rest of the song, and that's how it works. I mean, you can, I've built it up and just... In the mix, it actually sounds quite nice. On its own, it sounds like one of those sad organs you hear at a hockey game. I wonder if I could, like... No, I'm not going to do that. Doesn't sound like an organ at the hockey game. And then you would add in, like, I'll find a good decent part of the song where you can listen to all the different bits and pieces that would go together on this. You've got a bass line. I love this synth. It's got some nice grit to it. It's a thing called Strom or something, or a Strom synth from which is included free with Reactor 3. Spending time getting a decent drum, that's an art. I went to a couple of producers, Hiver and Hammer, who did a mix on of Beloved. But the thing was, I'd always wanted to know some production tricks, and you basically, if you can, wander around, talk to some various people, and ask them how they do various things, because there are some standard ideas in music that everybody needs to know. Everybody can make their music themselves in their own way, but there are some standard production, or I suppose dynamic or engineering techniques, and a lot of what I've learned, because I've produced Future Perfect, were things I learned from engineers in various studios. And getting a good bass drum and making it sing through your mix, that's an art. In this style of music at least. Getting your strings all to sound sort of clear and not muddy is something I'm still working on, but we'll get there. The next, I suppose, section of all this is, I mean, simple stuff. You know, here's where it all got mixed, and all these fun effects got added to it. And a lot of them, to be honest, and a lot of the effects I used on the album were pretty much the ones that were included with Logic 5. I mean, this is Logic 4.7 I'm using here, but I used Logic 5 for a lot of the album, and I ended up finding that a lot of the effects had seriously improved, and then using things like the TC Power Core. I was using some really nice parametric EQs, so that when I came up to, I'll show you, so that you understand this, because this is going to sound, I'm going to mute the effect so you get the idea. This is the ES1, the crap little synth that comes with Logic. And I'm going to... That's what it sounded like without anything. And then you turn back on these. Now that may sound like really piercing and scratchy, but the fact is that sort of cuts through your mix, and that's what you want. And that's basically, you can distort stuff with parametric EQs and muck about with them. There's tons of websites online with copyright-free sounds. Don't use copyright sounds. You'll end up in a world of trouble if you use someone else's sound. I've heard 4 bands ripping off loops from other bands, and you're not Puff Daddy. And he pays a lot of money for the rights to use those loops anyway, to make completely uninspired music, I think. But the main thing is, there's tons of sites out there with loads of WAV files. Make sure you got the copyright on them, and have fun with them. But I mean, I used one simple one in here, which is just... that's another thing about Reactor that I absolutely love, is sometimes the notes stick. Just shut up. Is that all of them? Yeah, it is. Alright. Nice. No, I really like that. That's basically it. I don't really know what else to tell you. I guess when it comes around to album 5, there'll probably be some kind of information about how we made that, if this hasn't bored you enough and you actually want to see it. On tour, I've brought a laptop with me and sort of a minimal little setup so I can write music and sort of come up with any ideas as I go. I've also used it for finishing up any last bits and pieces on the album Future Perfect. And the main thing is, when people sort of see this setup, is that this is all I need. It actually recreates everything I've done Future Perfect with, because one of the main ambitions with the album was to write it entirely on a PC, so that it would be, we could concentrate and focus on all the hardware, or the technology that's available for computers now. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not a Mac user, and I don't want to hear any comments from any of the audience about whether they like a Mac or a PC. As far as I'm concerned, this does the job for me. It's not what you've got, it's how you use it. Well, this is just one of about 20 synths we picked out of the Reactor program, and we decided to use for that. They've got their own unique sounds, and this one, it's a variation of an old synth from the early 80s that somebody has decided to modify to make it sound a little bit more practical for a lot of dance music today, and it's worked very well for us. This was the only synth that was used on the C92 version of Genesis. 4 different versions of it, 4 different sounds, and it seems to have its own character. It does everything it needs to. Things like Logic Audio, which is our mainstay, which is probably going to come up with an error now, because it seems to be having a bit of a problem trying to find some of the plugins. But that's the beauty, and none of you Mac users, you can stop that. It happens with Macs too. Through this I have like a lot of synths built in, samplers as well, like this little fella here, which is going to hopefully load up. Think about it. Yes. So this setup then allows you to use like loads of effects. You decide where you want your effects to be, and you decide, you know, okay, I'd like a delay or a reverb, and on comes an effect. And it's basically like a full recording studio, but all in the confines of a laptop. And this is what I do on tour. And this is how I spend my time. Whenever I get a little idea, I can take this fella out on the plane or wherever and work away. That is the voice of Peddy, who's our main roadie, main sort of backliner, who's the gentleman who runs around on stage making sure that the screens are all set up. And he speaks beautiful German, as a lot of people have noted. He sits there going, "Das ist deine Welt." And everyone goes, "Ooh," big, deep, thespian voice. And this is my friend Severine, and that was me at the beginning, in case you didn't know. We wanted to have actually we wanted to have 2 other languages in it, in the intro, because I didn't think it was very fair. Let me stop that. There we go. We wanted to have Spanish, because we're going to the United States, and it's the 2nd largest spoken language in the United States. And obviously we have a lot of Hispanic fans and a lot of fans in Spain. But in the end, we actually couldn't find somebody who didn't have an accent. Everybody we found who was going to be able to do the intro, who was going to be able to do do both the translation and then the spoken word bit, had a really thick accent. And everybody who we had, like, who could actually speak with some feeling in their voice and say, "Ooh, deep and meaningful," and "Ooh," ended up speaking with either a really, really tough, like Speedy Gonzalez accent, or something like that. And the same thing happens with, we also wanted it in Japanese, because, to be honest, well, we could have 20 languages in this. We could have we could have Hebrew, we could have Swahili, you name the language. The whole point is but it was to appeal to largest listening audiences, and as well as having some appeal for being international, and sort of that we're trying to communicate and giving the essence that we're trying to communicate with people from around the world, no matter where they're from. And in the end, we ended up with only 3 languages, which meant we covered Europe. And I'm really sorry about that. But, there was a point in history where Americans might have spoken French. So I suppose it is, we're appealing to people in Canada, Quebecois, and all you francophones out there. I hope you're happy. We got you English and German, and then we had we got French on there as well. I worked on the album cover with this as well, which was kind of nice. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. This is kind of like a, where are you? Ah, yes. This is like the original test for the album cover, if you can see it. I don't know if you can. Are you able to see that okay? Yes? Very good. You are able to speak, right?
Yes.
You are able to, there we go.
Sometimes.
Very, very nice. Not exactly centered, but then the thing is, this becomes my portable station, because I've always done the artwork for VNV's albums, with the help on this one with a young gentleman by the name of Mr. Frost, and who we sort of worked on some ideas and concepts, and he had his own sort of idea of how this all be put together. And this image was done by the company who've done a lot of CGI images for us, called Raumgleiter in Switzerland, and they've done some really, really intense images where you get to see us standing in places that we would not ordinarily be able to be, like in a futuristic city. That is the whole sort of essence and theme of, or the aesthetic of Future Perfect, is to sort of take us back into a metropolis world and examine the world we're living in, either from a distance or look at it from another point of view. And so they've provided us a nice little image for the background of the album cover, and we wanted to give it a very sort of futuristic and yet a retro-futuristic theme. So I think we've done very, very well with that. We're very, very happy. Mark and I like this very much. And yeah, and this is what I do. I just sit here either on the bus, somewhere in the back lounge, or find myself a nice little office and take someone's backstage away from them. So everybody has to live in cramped conditions just so I can sit here and do stuff like this. And you get the results, of course, all you people at home. And I hope you're happy with it.